This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis visits a foundation that helps the poor and asks them to be witnesses to the faith. The Pope also receives some very special guests in the Vatican. And coming to you soon, the international Be the Mercy of God campaign. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. On Sunday, June the 19th, before the Angelus prayer, Pope Francis reflected on the passage of the Gospel of Luke that describes the moment in which Peter recognizes Jesus as the Messiah. The Holy Father reflected on the line, "Who is Jesus for each of us?" and on the truth of the meaning of the cross.
Se qualcuno vuole venire dietro a me,
If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. This is not an ornamental or an ideological cross, he said, but it is the cross of our daily lives and the sacrifices we make for the sake of others, parents, children, families, friends, or even our enemies. It is the cross of solidarity with the poor. He said of our commitment to justice and to peace. In taking up these attitudes, we must never forget that whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. It's losing to gain.
After leading the prayer of the Angelus, the Pontiff invited those present to pray together with him for the start of the Pan-Orthodox Council, that the Holy Spirit would guide them during this historic event. Before concluding, the Pope launched an appeal for solidarity with refugees on the occasion of the World Refugee Day, promoted by the UN, which would be celebrated a day later on June the 20th.
This year's theme is With Refugees. We are on the side of those who are forced to flee. The refugees are people just like us, but that war has taken from their houses, work, relatives, and friends. Their stories and their faces call us to renew our efforts to build peace and justice. We want to be with them, encounter them, receive them, listen to them, so as to become again artisans of peace, according to the will of God.
On Friday, June the 17th, among the many morning activities of the Holy Father, he held an audience with the participants in the 28th Plenary Assembly of the Pontifical Council for the Laity. Pope Francis thanked them for the service the Council has been carrying out for nearly 50 years now. During his speech, he spoke to them of the importance and the necessity that the Church has in relying on well-formed laity that live a personal encounter of their love of Christ each day. He also threw out a proposal to them that he titled, "Church Going Out, Laity Going Out." With this, the Pontiff invited them to shift their gaze to the many families in difficulty and in need of mercy. The Pontifical Council for the Laity was born as a fruit of the Second Vatican Council for the pastoral care of the baptized. Until now, it has existed as an independent entity within the Roman Curia. But as of the 1st of September, within the reform efforts being carried out by the Pope, it will be part of a new Vatican department that will group together different offices for laity, family, and life.
Your Pontifical Council will take on a new physiognomy. It is the conclusion of an important stage and the opening of a new one for the dicastery of the Roman Curia that has accompanied the life, the maturation, and the transformation of the Catholic laity from the Second Vatican Council until today.
On the afternoon of the same day, continuing with his activities of Mercy Fridays, the Pope visited a community of priests in Rome by surprise. The St. Cayetan House, known as the House of the 100 Priests. Today, 21 elderly priests, many of them sick and quite forgotten, call it home. The Vatican spokesman, Father Federico Lombardi, said that with this gesture, Pope Francis gives once again an efficacious example of mercy, attention, and gratitude to all of the community of Rome and the Church. This is the 6th monthly visit that the Pope has made to a community of the Church in Rome, as an example of a concrete work of mercy. The first visit was carried out in January of this year, when the Pope visited elderly and patients in a vegetative state. On the morning of June the 16th, the Holy Father received the participants in the yearly meetings of the Work for the Help of Eastern Churches, known as ROACO, in the Clementine Hall of the Apostolic Palace. In his remarks, the Pope greeted the pontifical representatives from Jerusalem, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Ukraine who are accompanying the life of the Church in those countries. Pontiff thanked them for all they do to carry forward their mission.
I am grateful for the zeal that all of you have shown in carrying out the mission entrusted to you, and for your attention to the needs of our brothers and sisters in the East. Present at this meeting, too, are the papal representatives in Jerusalem, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Jordan, and Ukraine. They accompany the life of the churches and peoples of those countries, demonstrating the closeness of the Pope and the Holy See, not only through their contacts, but also through gestures of concrete charity, in coordination with all the concerned offices of the Holy See.
On Thursday afternoon, in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, was the scene of the opening of the Ecclesial Convention of the Diocese of Rome. They were meeting under the theme, The Joy of Love, the Path of Families in Rome, in light of the apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia. At the meeting, priests, pastoral workers, catechists, and families were present. The Pope asked them to apply a pastoral care for the family that welcomes, accompanies, discerns, and integrates. In his dialogue with the participants, the Pope also denounced the culture of the provisional that damages married life.
Neither rigorism nor laxity are truth. The gospel chooses another path. For this, those 4 words, welcome, accompaniment, integrity, discernment, without sticking a nose in the moral life of the people.
In his dialogue with the participants, the Pope also denounced the culture of the provisional that damages married life.
It's so beautiful to find grandparents who show the joy that is born of having made a choice of and for love. I see so many elderly spouses, and I always ask, who has been most patient? The reply, both of us. It's such a beautiful answer. There is a couple married for 60 years, and they told me, we are still in love. And I tell it to them, show it to the young people who get tired quickly, and after 2 or 3 years, they just return to mama.
The Holy Father reminded them also of the importance of preparation for marriage and not to confuse it with a mere social fact. On June the 18th, Pope Francis celebrated the 7th Jubilee audience of the Extraordinary Jubilee of the Holy Year of Mercy. The main theme of the catechesis was conversion, returning again to the Father. The Pontiff insisted on the interior dimension of the act of converting, an act of will through which a person commits themselves, in body and soul, to being born anew.
Also, Jesus preached conversion, and did it from his closeness with sinners and the needy. In this way, he showed them the love of God. All felt loved by the Father through him, and felt called to change their lives. Authentic conversion is produced when we experience the love of God within ourselves, and we accept the gift of his mercy. And a clear sign that conversion is authentic is when we realize the necessities of our neighbor, and we go out to meet them, to help them.
And it is Jesus himself who invites us to begin this path of conversion.
It is him, with the Holy Spirit, that sows in us this restlessness to change our lives and to be a little better. We follow then this invitation of the Lord, and we don't put up resistance, because only if we open ourselves to his mercy do we find true life and true joy. We must only open wide the door, and he does the rest. He does everything. But it is up to us to open wide our hearts so that he can heal us and help us move forward. I assure you that we will be happier.
Before bidding farewell, the Pope remembered the figure of St. William the Abbot. Turning to young people, he invited them to follow the example of this extraordinary man and be courageous in choosing the good over all things. On this stunningly beautiful little campus in the heart of Rome, underprivileged young people with privileged minds are given the chance to rise above their economic circumstances. It's called the Villa Nazareth, and it's been helping young people make the most of their talents for the last 7 decades.
We are celebrating the 70th anniversary of Villa Nazareth. Cardinal Tardini was founded in 1946, after the Second World War. And his idea was to help kids who remained orphaned after the war, and so coming from families with some economical difficulties. During all these years, we were facilitating the doctorate of almost 900 people. And this for us is something special.
The founder was Monsignor Domenico Tardini, who would later become the Vatican Secretary of State. His dream was to establish a model based on the parable of the talents, helping those with modest means to realize their full potential. 124 students receive scholarships from them today. All expenses paid for tuition, meals, and lodging on or off campus. 75 are residents here at the villa, divided into quarters for men and women. All would have been hard-pressed to complete their higher education on their own means. They study the field of their choice in local Roman universities, anything from medicine to law and even music. While they don't all attend classes at the same institution, here on the grounds they have a common home, fraternity, and fellowship, also in organized activities outside the villa grounds.
Villa offre un percorso formativo.
Villa offers a formative path, so it's not just a house for students, but it has something to offer, something to propose. This allows the young person the possibility to develop their own talents, to open themselves up to dialogue with the world, and in the measure in which they are available, to also deepen their faith as adults seeking to understand what relationship, what dialogue there should be between their path of faith and the world in which they live. This here is our great challenge as Villa Nazareth.
La grande sfida nostra di Villa Nazareth.
The majority of the students, like Angelo Tuminelli, traditionally comes from different regions of Italy. Now, with Pope Francis' gaze emphatically set out into the world, as they prepare to begin their professional lives, they're seeking to create common ground among cultures. We've wanted to enter into the logic of the periphery, so the community life isn't just what's being lived in the headquarters in Rome, but the role of the periphery and the local territory in assuming an ever more communitarian importance. So the beauty of this activity resides precisely in doing in a way that once the experience of Rome is finished, when we return to our homes to spend our talents, there is still a possibility for encounter, cultural debate, and reflection. That spirit of diaconia, of culture, that is proper of our reality. In that same perspective, in recent years, the Villa has also started accepting students from other nations, most recently Palestine, Ethiopia, Romania, and Moldova. Not all are Christian. This year, 2 Muslims, including this young man from Afghanistan, who preferred not to be interviewed, are also benefiting from the program. But as the Villa reaches out to new horizons, the Christian values-based mission remains the same. And Cardinal Tardini's stamp is always there, an ever-present reminder even in the artwork of the chapel's tabernacle. A child is depicted with Jesus with his arms outstretched. There's a phrase below, a passage we find in the Gospel of Mark, which is Angeli eorum semper videt facem patris. Their angels always look to the face of the Father. Villa Nazareth was made 70 years ago for the children, the kids who were orphaned because of the war, the suffering here in Italy. Nowadays, Villa Nazareth addresses itself especially to men and women, university students, but the message is identical. It's a bit of the heart of Christianity, always going back to the figure, the child that is within each of us. Because, as Jesus says in the Gospel, only by becoming children can we authentically live out the faith of closeness, made of spontaneities, without masks, without superstructures, that can also be an obstacle to our testimony and the evangelical message.
La testimonianza e il messaggio evangelico.
And this is why Pope Francis wanted to visit on June the 18th, to celebrate the continuation of the Villa's mission.
Now this year is the 70th anniversary, and we are questioning ourselves about our goals, about our charism. And the importance of the Pope Francis visit for us is this, exactly this, to rediscover what is the real goal of Villa Nazareth. Certainly is the discovery and the promotion of the talent. We are looking for young people very much qualified intellectually, but certainly always coming from families with economical difficulties. But for us, the task is to help them to develop the gifts received from God and to put all this in the service of humanity.
During his speech and in the face of the persecution that millions of Christians in the entire world live with, the Pope took advantage of the occasion to give his definition of martyrdom.
Non facciamo un reduzionismo sociologico.
Let's not make a sociological reductionism of that which is a mystery of the faith, martyrdom. Those 13, I believe they were Egyptian Coptic Christian men, saints today, canonized by the Coptic Church, their throats cut on the beaches of Libya. They all died saying, "Jesus, help me." Jesus. But I'm sure that the majority of them did not even know how to read. They weren't teachers of theology, no. They were people, as they say, uneducated. But they were teachers of Christian coherency. That is, witnesses of faith. And the faith makes us give testimony to so many difficult things in life. But let's not kid ourselves. Brutal martyrdom isn't the only way of bearing witness to Jesus Christ. It's the maximum, let us say, heroic. It's true that today there are more martyrs than in the first centuries of the Church. That is true. But there is the martyrdom of every day, the martyrdom of honesty, the martyrdom of patience, of the education of
Il
children.
martirio della pazienza nell'educazione dei figli.
A Jubilee of Mercy is an opportunity to bring God's mercy to everyone. This time, Pope Francis invited circus artists and street performers to have their own Jubilee audience. Thursday, June the 16th, Pope Francis welcomed representatives of the world of traveling performers, folk shows, and the circus to the Vatican's Paul VI Hall. The artists came on a 2-day pilgrimage to Rome from all over Europe, the Americas, and Africa.
You are artisans of festivities, of wonder, of beauty. With these qualities you enrich all world society, even with the aim of nurturing sentiments of hope and confidence.
Di speranza e di fiducia.
Pope Francis thanked the performers for their talent and active participation in the Jubilee of Mercy.
I congratulate you, because in this year you have opened your shows to the neediest, the poor and the homeless, prisoners and disadvantaged children. This too is mercy, to sow beauty and joy in a world sometimes gloomy and sad. Thank you. Thank you for this.
Also, what I had done has in some way a religious meaning. Pulcilinesco, we could say.
You do so through exhibitions that have the capacity to elevate the spirit, to show the audacity of particularly demanding exercises, to fascinate with the wonder of the beautiful, and of proposing occasions of healthy entertainment.
Occasioni di sano divertimento. Secondo, voi potete far nascere il sorriso.
You can make a child smile and illumine for an instant the desperate look of a person alone, and through the show and celebration, render men closer to one another. You can even scare the Pope, making him pet a tiger. You're powerful.
Early June's Jubilee for Priests events in Rome became an opportunity for Sarah Figueiredo and her son, Monsignor Anthony Figueiredo, to reminisce on his life and his vocation to the priesthood. After all, it was she and her late husband's faith that led them to give the future Monsignor life, despite doctors' counsel to abort him in the womb.
It was the famous years of thalidomide. Mothers were given a certain medication to help them sleep, and so many children in those years were born with shortened limbs, some very seriously. And the doctors, knowing that I would be born with a disability, took my parents aside during the pregnancy and advised them that they should really consider seriously having an abortion. My parents really don't like talking about that too much, but they did tell me that story on the day of my ordination 22 years ago in Newark, New Jersey. And what they specifically told the doctors, that if God has allowed us to conceive a child, that child will not be wasted. On the contrary, God will have a mission for that child, which they believed very strongly was that I would be a priest.
Even if a child can't walk or is down, we still have the child, you know. So he was grown nicely. I know I had a mission that one day he will be a priest. Something I dreamt one day that I didn't tell anyone. I dreamt that one of my sons, the last one, whoever it is, the son, one of my sons, I always prayed, if I got a son, I would like a son, priest, even my husband, you know. I always said, I hope we have, even if we have, you know, boy, one of the boys will be a priest. And when Father Tony had a vocation, we were so happy, you know.
I think it's been very powerful. I'm one of the fourth generation on my father's side of priests, and particularly that parents will hand on their faith to their children, encouraging them to be open to God's will. My parents never discouraged me from being a priest. With great sacrifice, they sent all of us children to Catholic schools, and I think now, certainly in my mother's old age, she's the happiest woman in the world, one would say, because she has a son who is a priest. So God always gives 100-fold. God is never outdone in generosity. I wish more parents would give their children to be priests and religious in the world today.
Oh, and there's a lot of blessings, you know, being a priest, a lot of blessing. I feel so, and you know, I feel so, you know, I feel that God has given me a gift that I ask Him. To be a priest, you know, it's not just become priest. But Tony is to me, he does, you know, he's very, very sort of close to me. From a young age, he's very close.
I truly believe what St. Paul says, God's power is made perfect in weakness. And I think those priests, as every Christian, has a cross, but priests who particularly have a cross can show a certain compassion, a certain mercy to those who are suffering. You know, I can preach till the cows come home, I can do all sorts of things, but I think when people see that you yourself suffer in your flesh, one immediately connects.
Particularly moving for the Figueiredo family was the opportunity they had to meet privately with Pope Francis before the June 3rd Jubilee Mass for priests. The Pope gave Sarah the anointing of the sick. She has had 2 strokes in recent years and has been battling cancer. To top it off, she also brought up the gifts later that day during Mass.
I was so happy that day, and whatever he asked me, I could answer easily, you know. Whatever he was asking me where I've come and all that, you know. He knows Father Tony, definitely he knows. And then I felt very gifted. I felt gifted. God is a gift from God.
I think it was a special gift that my mother, God is faithful, and for my mother to meet the Holy Father at the Mass for the Jubilee of Priests, for my mother to take up the chalice on that day, the Feast of the Sacred Heart, the Jubilee of Priests, was an enormous sign to me that God is faithful. And God is faithful, I think, especially to those who give something of their life to Him, whether it's parents with their children, whether it's someone who's old and suffering and offers that suffering up, whether it's us as priests or religious.
Thank you.
A memorable gift to the whole Figueiredo family, connected to the enormous gift of Monsignor's vocation. On Friday, June the 17th, the Pontifical Foundation Aid to the Church in Need launched an international campaign called Be God's Mercy. On the morning of that same day, the Holy Father received them an audience in the Vatican. Among the representatives of the foundation, the presence of its president, Cardinal Mauro Piacenza, and its Secretary General, Philip Ozores, stood out. The campaign seeks to give incentives to concrete acts of mercy, and for this end, Pope Francis recorded a video where he invites all people not to be scared of mercy, because, he said, mercy is the caress of God.
Los hombres y las mujeres necesitamos de la misericordia de Dios, pero también necesitamos de nuestra misericordia. Necesitamos darnos la mano, acariciarnos, cuidarnos. Así que los invito a todos, junto a Kirchheinrich, a hacer en cada lugar de todo el mundo una obra fija de misericordia. Y no le tengan miedo a la misericordia. La misericordia es la caricia de Dios.